3.3 Major Project, Project 5, Presentation and Feedback. In this video I want to talk about what work I'm going to start to look at in Project 5. I've already worked with the large scale samples in Project 4. I've put a collection of videos together by where I've demonstrated how the fabrics and my mixed media materials perform with movement, still continuing to use the body as a platform. But I just want to kind of now move forward with the ideas of dyslexia, the ideas of armour, and also bring in a little bit more in-depth research of the research that I've been looking at with the ateliers, Alexander McQueen, Jean-Paul Gaultier, John Galliano. Now, I did some sampling of armour in Project 4 where it was knitted with techniques, and then I kind of made those a little bit more mature with the delivery, and then I kind of expanded with some more playful ideas of armour, whereby I just started to use the colours from the playground and bring that into the work. So there's kind of two elements of the work going on, something that's a little bit more mature and commercial, and then something that's a lot more playful, but they all come together as a collection. One thing that I'm kind of finding with the work that is being produced by the ateliers is the amount of different types of design and shapes that can form in just one collection alone. So at first I was a little bit concerned about my colour palette and thinking that it should flow through and so forth, but I think I've let go of that now, and as long as I'm happy with what I'm doing or anything that I'm triggered by with an idea, I am going to use. So I think as a broad collection it doesn't matter if all the pieces speak for themselves, because they are all different. Now, going into deeper research of the atelier, I've been looking at the ideas of how garments are structured and constructed, and how they are finished off with detail, and what makes them different or what attracts them for the audience to look at. And I think it's an important thing that the audience needs to realise, that with the atelier designs and the performance shows, because the fashion is now becoming art, that you do have to have an eye for detail. So what I would like to do for Project 5 is to reduce down some of the scales of my sampling, and I think I'm going to go back to the sketchbook where I'm going to start some illustrations and do some designs of ideas and so forth. But one idea that I wanted to bring back through was the idea of the back brace. This is going to be used because I, as of yet, got a large scale sample to complete, which will be attached to this piece and worn. But the idea of the back brace came from looking at the armour and the defence protective wear that is used in fencing, sword fencing. So this has now furthered my develops and my investigations into different types of harness or back brace. And some of the samples that I've got, I'm going to use as a platform to start to attach and play with some smaller scale samples, and use the harnesses and pieces as a platform. So I'd returned back to some prototypes that I'd done in Project 4, where I'd played around with the ideas of armour and so forth, and how I could translate these into knit. And again here I have a synthetic back brace by where I've attached a prototype to. And this, again, it can be durable, it can be worn, and the wearer can perform in this. But one thing that I think is a key thing that really works and comes from the research of the atelier, how this alone would attract interest to its audience, possibly for the future, if it was made to actually be worn. For example, it could either be an accessory for a coat or a jacket, or in actual fact possibly a bag of some description. So these ideas are kind of evolving and developing through design making and my own prototype making. I'd also looked at as to whether this is a fetish harness. I have no idea, but again, it could be worn and used as a piece of armour on the shoulder. I'd use my tubes and knitting, which kind of almost resonated with a piece of a rib cage. I'd sprayed this silver in Project 4 just as an experiment to achieve some metallic results. And then I'd also, with the prototype pieces where I played with balls and sound, I've attached this to a harness, and again it can either be worn around the waist or across the torso, but if to move, perform and dance in that, this brings the idea of the sound into that piece. I went further back into my sample making of some earlier samples, and I here produced this piece, which returns back to the idea of the thin red line for dyslexia. Again, this would make an ideal performance piece for dance and movement, but again, it secures to the torso. It could either be worn on the back or we could wear it on the torso. So again, I'm just continually returning to some ideas and extracting, and I think it is the way that I work with this methodical method, but I think that's possibly the designer in me, in my textile practice, that continuously is looking out for ideas within my own work. Also as well, I think what is working at the moment is the idea of the mind mapping to start off a project, and also the interrogation board. I think this is now filtering through. If I was being honest, I think the project plan is now within the mind mapping that I'm doing, so I'm going to connect the mind map links to my project plan, because sometimes I kind of veer away from all of that. But so far, this is the direction that I'm going to continue with in Project 5. And again, just to quickly show the audience this is another piece that will just actually strap to the back. And this is just plain again, returning back to the idea of the balls, obviously with a 3 colour way palette. Again, still keeping the idea of the Bauhaus Ballet, by where they use structures within their performance pieces to change the silhouettes of the body.